Hey everybody, welcome back to Elysium. Let's get going on combat. Now, as a brief recap from last video, I wanted to go through an action that's going to result in combat, because as we learned, combat comes from a blocked action. Let's say that my opponent doesn't like me having this labyrinth, because I can lock it to give any Nosferatu clan vampire +1 stealth. And so they play a mean little card called Arson. Burn a location. So the minion of one of my opponents is playing this during their turn. It's not my turn right now. It's somebody else's turn. And as a direct action, they are saying, I'm going to burn your location. Now they know that I've got a Raven spy on this vampire, which gives me +1 intercept. I wouldn't even need the intercept anyway in order to block this action because it has no stealth with it. So they need to put something up in order to get the action through. Let's pretend that they have superior obfuscate and they play Lost in Crowds, which basically just gives them +2 stealth with superior obfuscate. This extra text is basically just saying there's another card that you cannot combine this with. So they're performing Arson at +2 stealth. Well, because of this retainer, which remember is like a piece of living equipment, it gives me +1 intercept. So I need something from my hand to get +1 more intercept at least. So I'm going to play this reaction called Cat's Guidance. And because this guy has superior animalism, oh man, I gotta focus on him better. So he's got standard obfuscate, superior animalism, superior potence. So with his superior animalism, he's able to get another +1 intercept. This costs me nothing. There is no cost. It's just I have animalism. It's a reaction card, so he can't really do anything about it. So that's another +1 to my intercept. So now my intercept matches his stealth. Let's pretend that he has no more stealth to add. So I successfully block his Arson. Now my minion is locked. His is already locked from attempting the Arson. And a combat ensues. I draw a card because I used one. Now we are in combat. Now, the first thing you do in combat, there are 7 steps. Most of them go by pretty quickly, so don't be daunted by that. Step number 1 is before range is determined. There are not very many card effects that take place at this stage. If either player has any, they'll speak up right now in the first phase of combat before range is determined, because phase number 2 of combat is determine range. Now, all combat in this game takes place by default at melee range, but people can play a maneuver to change it from melee range to long range, and then the other player can play a maneuver to change it from long range to melee range. Now, let's pretend that the opponent that I'm blocking right now has this equipment, the 44 Magnum. They've got it attached to their character, 2R each strike, with an optional maneuver each combat. That 2R means 2 damage ranged, 2 ranged damage. The beautiful thing about range damage in this game is that you can use it at close or long range, whereas anything that does melee damage can only be used at melee range. So he's got a weapon, he's got a gun that he can use at range and a maneuver. Most guns come with a maneuver. So he's going to use that maneuver to put the combat at long range where I cannot get to him. So if the strikes happen right now, then he'll hit me for 2 damage, and because I don't have any ranged weapons on me, I will hit him for nothing. I will not be allowed to hit him. So I need to figure something out. Anyway, phase 3. So he uses his maneuver to put the combat at range. So now it's no longer melee, we're at range. If I had a maneuver card, I would want to play it to get the combat back to melee, but I don't. So it's going to take place at long range. Now, step number 3 is called before strikes. Some cards have this effect. Actually, we're going to see one in just a moment, but let's say neither of us have any before strikes cards, so we're going to skip that and go right into phase 4, strikes. This is where you announce and resolve your strikes. This could come from a card or a weapon. If you only have melee and combat is happening at range, then you do 0 damage. If you have no card or item to boost your attack value, you will always do 1 melee damage by default as a hand strike. Note, if somebody's strike says combat ends, then that takes priority and occurs before any other strike. Even something that has first strike. If you play a combat ends strike, then no damage is exchanged. The combat is shut down hard. Anyway, so my opponent during this phase of the turn is going to say, okay, I'm going to use my 44 Magnum to hit you for 2 at range. And I'm going to say, well, guess what? I have this combat card called Thrown Gate. It requires potence, and my guy has superior potence. That's supernatural strength. So I can do strike 2 ranged with an optional maneuver. So I'm going to do 2 damage to my opponent also. This goes straight to discard. So my opponent and I will each take 2 damage. So I lose 2 blood, goes to the blood bank, which takes us to the 5th phase, which I just hastily did, called damage resolution, where I took 2 damage, so I had to burn 2 blood to heal that damage. My opponent did the same. And then phase 6 is called press. Oh, let me replace my Thrown Gate. So let's say my opponent has a card in their hand called Boxed In. Now, what does a press do? A press forces combat to go another round. See, if nobody plays a press, then the combat ends and we both slink away from the fight. But if somebody has a card that says press, they can play it now to make combat go another round. But then if I have a card that says press, I can play it to have the combat go back to ending right now. And you go back and forth until somebody declines. But let's say my opponent plays Boxed In. He sees he's got an advantage. He's got a ranged weapon. Combat is right now at range. And I've got no way. He thinks this Thrown Gate was my only option to hit him back. So he's going to press to make combat go another round. And then phase 7, of course, is end of round. So we go another round. Phase 1, before range. I don't have any effects that take place before range. Number 2, determine range. This is where I use that maneuver that I got from the Thrown Gate. So we go from long range that it was at in the first round. Now we're back to close range because I got a maneuver from the Thrown Gate. Now, phase 3 says before strikes. And I've got this little card here in my hand called Immortal Grapple. Only usable at close range before strikes are chosen. A vampire can play only 1 Immortal Grapple each round. Now, because I have superior potence, I get the bolded text. So I get both the top one and this. So strikes that are not hand strikes cannot be used this round. So normally he would be allowed to use his 44 Magnum at melee range because ranged weapons can, but this card is preventing that. And then the superior one says, as above, with one optional press. If another round of combat occurs, that round is at close range. Skip the determined range step for that round. So if I want, I play this. Now, not only are we fighting at close range, but he can't even use his gun. He's going to have to just punch me. I'll draw to replace that. And if I choose to use that press to keep combat going, then he has no option to go back to long range. That was phase 3, before strikes, because this card says that's when you have to play it, before strikes are determined. Now we're on phase 4, strikes. You announce and resolve your strikes. So he can only do a hand strike, and I have this combat card in my hand called Roundhouse. Now, I guess the developers didn't know that a roundhouse is a type of kick, but whatever, we'll pretend that it's a big hook punch. So, my guy, remember, has superior potence, so that I can do hand strike at +3. Whoa. So I'm hand striking him for 4 damage, and he's only got 1 damage on me. Now, step 5 is damage resolution. I'll take the 1, my opponent will take 4. So I've now done 6 damage to him. Is he out? I don't know. He was a hypothetical vampire, so maybe he's out. We're going to talk about what happens when a vampire gets beaten up to that degree. So now it's time to decide if we're going to do another press. Oh, I need to draw to replace roundhouse. Now, I don't have much more up my sleeve. I could go another round. But we'll say yes, I'm going to use the press to try to go another round of combat. But let's say he maybe drew a press also. And so he plays that press to counter my press, so combat ends. So darn, I didn't get a chance to hit him again. But now that we're on, so press is phase 6 of the combat. Now we're on end of round, and I will play this little card called Taste of Vitae. Vitae is vampire blood. Only usable at the end of a round of combat, not usable by a vampire being burned or going to torpor. We're going to talk about that. A vampire can play only 1 taste of Vitae each round. This vampire gains blood equal to the amount of blood lost by the opposing vampire to damage this round. Well, I did 4 damage to him. So because of that combat card, which I play at the end of the round, I get to grab 4 blood from the blood bank and heal myself. So that'll teach him to try and burn down one of my locations. Now, as a side note, if he wanted to, he could have targeted my retainer. During combat, your opponent can target your retainers, because retainers have life and they can kill them. So he could have shot my Raven Spy if he wanted to, but he didn't. So that's the end of the round of combat. And that's all there is to it. I mean, there are so many possibilities with all of the cool cards in this. This was just an example of a round of combat. But to recap, 7 steps of combat. Number 1, before range is determined. Some combat cards will be played at this phase. And by the way, when I say combat card, I am referring to a card that has that symbol, those little arrows going at each other. That is a combat card. Combat is the time to play these effects, and they will always tell you when to play them, when in the combat round you play them. Also, if 7 steps seems like a lot, remember, you've got this little quick reference card that comes with every deck that you purchase. And right here, we've got the combat steps. Before range, determine range. Before strikes, strike, damage resolution. By the way, if you have anything that prevents damage, like the fortitude discipline will often have effects that will undo damage that you might have taken. That's the time to play it, is damage resolution. 6 is press, to either keep the combat going or shut it down. And then 7 is end of round. So, and determining range is done by playing maneuvers. You start at melee, play a maneuver to bring it to range, play another maneuver to bring it back to melee. Both players go back and forth to determine the range. Any weapon that has an R next to the damage number, like the 44 Magnum, 2R each strike. R weapons can be used at close or long range, but weapons like maybe the chainsaw can only be used at melee. So range is part of your strategy. And presses, those also, just like maneuvers, they go back and forth. It's also similar to stealth and intercept. You go back and forth until somebody bends the knee and has to submit. So that is a round of combat. That's how it works. There are times when it's very risky. There are some vampires with disciplines like Potence that are deadly at either range, because Potence has things like thrown sewer lid, thrown gate, well-aimed car. Potence can do some nasty stuff at range, but it also gives you stuff like roundhouse that I played, which just gives you a massive damage bonus. Potence is kind of scary. Protean is another scary one because it can do aggravated damage. What is aggravated damage? Well, you know how when we took damage, we were able to burn blood to heal it. When it's aggravated damage, you can't. You go straight to torpor. What's torpor? It's like a comatose state that vampires go into when they're sufficiently injured. Torpor is where you go when you have no blood to burn on healing, and then you take more damage. Then your vampire is placed. Let's pretend that he took all this damage. He would, with his Raven Spy, he would go into torpor. He's out of play. He's in the out of play area. Down here. He is no longer considered under my control. He's in a coma. And the only way to get him out is going to be discussed next video. But this should be sufficient to understand combat. Again, your vampires are a big investment. Getting them knocked out, they're tough because they don't die when they run out of health. They go into torpor, and then you have to rescue them. And I'll talk about that next video. Thanks for watching.
Now it's All Hallows Eve. The moon is full. Will she trick or treat?